Welcome to Loco Gringo Mexico, the place where we transform a tourist into a traveler, because you deserve to see more of the world than just what's in a guidebook. Each week, we talk with amazing locals who know the Riviera Maya and Yucatán like only a local can, and get them to share their tips and insights on the local scene, culture, and cuisine from a local's perspective. So, pour yourself a margarita, grab a comfy chair, and let's get the show going.
Hi, my name's Kay Walton, and welcome to Loco Gringo's weekly podcast, where we'll be sharing local views of people, places, things, culture, food, history. Wow, the list goes on. All great things here in the Yucatan Peninsula and Riviera Maya. We want to turn you on to some great stuff so that on your next trip to our area, you have a much more personal experience than you would than just read some guidebook or some review on the web. Anyways, let's get to it. Today we're going to be talking to my friend Keith Heitke, who I have known for a bunch of years. He has been living in Merida, Yucatan. He relocated from New York City, so you can bet it was a big change to come from New York, actually like Manhattan, and now live in Merida. So Keith has been involved with real estate since he came to the area. He's always had a passion for architecture and buildings, and he's turned that passion into a career. Keith has a lot of clients who are looking for historical buildings, both very high-end and even people who are looking for those fixer-uppers. Keith's going to share with us some tips on some questions that we get asked all the time, being here in Mexico, about buying property and ownership. And I was also able to get from Keith some information about his favorite places to go, some of those places you shouldn't miss on your next trip. Hey everybody, this is Kay with Loco Gringo, and I am really honored to have my dear friend Keith Heitke here. And Keith is in Merida, Yucatan. Hey Keith, how are you today?
Hello everybody, how are you, Kay?
Oh, hey, I'm great, and I always tell you guys, I think every time I speak with you, I got to say, oh, you know, Keith, I got to come to Merida, and it's with the fast road, I could be there in no time. So I promise I'm going to come soon and visit y'all.
Well, the good thing about it is every time we do get together, it's like no time has gone by. We just pick up, so that's great. And we have even more to talk about.
Well, that's for sure. And of course, we don't look any older either.
Exactly.
So, Keith, why don't you tell people, I mean, we've been friends, I can't remember, the years go by and it just seems to be, I don't know.
Well, if I think it's 10 years, it's probably 12 or 15, so who knows?
Oh. Geez, that long. But it's been great. But I wanted to have you explain to people. I mean, I met you guys through the cooking school and everything, but I wanted you to tell people, how you came to Mexico, a bit about your journey, because you're originally from New York, correct?
Well, we moved here from New York. We've lived now in Merida in the Yucatan it'll be 13 years. Just the first part of next year, 13 years. And really, the way that it started was that we have a friend. Well, I didn't even really know her that well. My partner, David Sterling, and I lived together in New York City. And he had a friend who moved to Merida many years ago. And she married the former mayor of Progreso, which is a town just north of Merida here, right on the coast. So she had moved down here, and she kept wanting us to visit. And I said, absolutely not. It's humid, it's flat, it sounds horrible. I wouldn't even want to visit there. In my New York bubble, I was thinking that. And it wasn't anything against Mexico at all. I love Mexico, but I loved central Mexico, and I loved western Mexico and Baja and all the places where big waves would crash, and it was beautiful. And I always knew that I really couldn't stand humidity. I didn't like flatness, and the small town aspect was just completely not my thing. So anyway, there's a long version and the short version. We're going to do the short version. So she had moved down here, and she had bought, it's a long story too, but she had bought a house in the golf club here. Again, totally not my thing at all. No judgments, but it's not for me. But she bought this house, and it was at least 6,000 square feet. And coming from Manhattan, we had a beautiful apartment overlooking the Hudson River, but 6,000 square feet. That's amazing. And it was very indoor, outdoor. So the reason that I know that is because she had said, I always come to New York at Christmas, but I'm going to be in Merida at Christmas. So David said, we could go down there. It's going to be cooler. It's not going to be as humid. And We can stay with her. It'll be great. We'll go to Akamal and we'll start there first, and then we'll go over. We'll just see what it's like. It'll be fun. And so anyway, that's what happened. And we came over to visit her, and I was amazed. Again, we're coming from frigid, expensive New York, where it's, you're all hopped up. And we arrived here in Merida, and we went to her home, and the brightest yellow birds you could imagine are chirping. There's, I don't think it was, but it felt like there were toucans in the trees. There was a beautiful warm breeze blowing, and it was kind of intoxicating. So anyway, long story short, David had gotten a large bonus and didn't want to put it in the stock market at the time. This was 2001, something like that. And so he didn't want to put it in the stock market, and he decided, well, maybe I'll buy a house in Merida. So she had set us up with a friend of hers who turns out to be the gentleman who owns the company that I've been working for 12 years in real estate. And I said, looking at houses, why would I do that? I don't even want to be here. This is not my thing. So she had set us up with this guy, and he took us around to see houses, and we thought, well, yeah, that's fine. They're cute, whatever. And then we started to get the idea of how inexpensive it was relative to what we were used to. So David decided to buy a house and use that bonus that he had made to buy a house in Merida, which at the time you could very easily. And so that's how that happened. And so he was just going to have this house. We didn't know what we were going to do with it. We were regular Americans with, if we were lucky, 4 weeks vacation a year. We couldn't live in another house. We couldn't live in another place. We both had jobs that required us to be in New York. So after 9/11, we decided that we didn't want to live in Manhattan anymore because we were living right on the Hudson River, right at the World Trade Center. We could.
Oh wow!
That was
I
our
didn't
view.
realize that. Wow.
Yeah, that was our. I have pictures. That was our view out of our window to the World Trade Center and the Hudson River. So anyway, it was our dream apartment, but it was going to be at least a 10-year nightmare in our neighborhood of getting around, which it actually was. And David had already lived in Manhattan for 25 years, so he was ready to live somewhere else. So we couldn't extricate ourselves, but what he said is, let's buy a place, almost like a country house. And because the other thing was that our apartment in New York skyrocketed in value. We thought we might have to give it away after 9/11 because it was basically under, they actually literally put all the pieces of the World Trade Center in front of our building because we were at the two dead end streets. Our building was. Our view was out the back, but at the front of it was the two dead end streets. So the pieces of the World Trade Center were literally in front of our apartment building. You had to step over them. So we decided to get this place. That was not for us at all. I had never commuted in my life, so it was almost an hour on the train, nightmare. Okay, speed through that. From the day we bought that country house, which is 1 hour north of New York City, from the day we bought it till the day we sold it was 6 months. We worked every single weekend on making it beautiful and, decorating it and making it as lovely as possible. We actually made money on it, even though we sold it within 6 months. And the point was that we were going to move to this house and figure out what we were going to do with it. So we had already started. The same woman that I mentioned, her husband used to be the mayor of Progreso. He's a Spanish literature professor, and in the summer he remodels houses because there's no school in the summer. So he was a built-in person that would be able to fulfill our dream and make our house. Well, everything was so cheap for us. Coming from New York again, it was cheap, but when you come from Manhattan, everything looks cheap. So we went crazy on a remodel, and we had traveled a lot in Spain. That was a thought of ours too, but it was going to be much more difficult at the time, much more expensive and difficult to go to Spain. For the beautiful, almost 4,000 square foot house we have in Merida, we could have gotten like a decent, maybe a 2-bedroom apartment in Spain. Not to mention, the people are like the British in Spain in many cases. Again, it's an overgeneralization, but everybody in Mexico was so welcoming and lovely. We just loved coming here. Again, a real contrast against New York. So we decided that would be the best idea, is to not go to Spain. However, we loved the architecture of Spain. So we went crazy on a house. We bought the house, as David did, for $38,000. And it was a crumbling wreck. And everybody is so opinionated in Merida, and they don't mind sharing their opinions with you. They said, oh my God, you'll never get your money back. You're in the wrong area. You're too close to downtown. You're crazy. Well, being a New Yorker, I don't listen to that. I decide where I want to be and what works for me. And that's what worked out. So we completely remodeled the house. It took about a year, almost a year and a half, actually. So it had a lot of details. I could go into that, obviously, because houses are my thing. But it was such a wonderful dream, and it was completely different because our apartment in New York was very, very modern, streamlined, clean. I worked in the furniture business forever, so I had all these amazing pieces from my travels and from my work. So this one couldn't take any single piece that we had because we did a very Spanish, very colonial Spanish Mexican style in this house. So that's the house where we're at, and that's where we've lived. We haven't moved. A lot of people I know, being in real estate, move all the time, and that's one of the ways that they do it. This is where we live, and this is where I want to be. And now other houses on the street. There's a house literally next door that is twice as wide and twice as deep. He's put easily $700,000 in it. And again, this is the area that people said, "Oh, you're crazy for living there." So that's the short version, Kay.
Wow. Well, you know what? I got to tell you. I mean, I've been to Keith and David's house, and it's stunning. It's beautiful. It's I can't. I mean, I would love to move in with you guys, and I enjoyed the time when I was cooking with David.
You're welcome anytime for a limited time.
But I mean, it takes my breath away. And I do remember it used to be really inexpensive to come to Merida. And at that time, it was also reasonably priced to be in the Riviera Maya. So I kind of kept my feet planted in the sand there. Now, so let me ask you this. You came from New York. You're in real estate now. But I mean, how is your Spanish? Did you or David speak Spanish when you arrived on the scene?
Well, that was a funny sort of thing, too. I had studied French, and I'm a real Francophile, and I had really loved French, but I didn't speak any Spanish at all. However, we knew almost a year before we moved here that we were going to be. We pretty much knew that, and so I was studying Spanish all the time. I remember on the subway, I had my list of words that I would study, and no, David spoke perfect Spanish. He had studied it forever, traveled in Mexico,
I didn't
all
know
over.
That.
Yeah, he did. But so it was really great. Like when we were together, I'd say, "Oh, order me a whatever," and it was super easy. Well, then I realized I'm out by myself and I don't know a word. So what I did is right after we got here. I didn't have any work at that time. I didn't know what I was going to do exactly. I didn't come here with a job, which is also a leap of faith. But what I did is I took Spanish lessons for 3 months. It was every weekday for 3 months. And it was very intense, and but it really worked. Also, they're so kind here. Like many people do not speak Spanish. A lot of people are surprised because we are inland. We're not in a super touristy area. There are tourists here, but there's way more locals. Hardly anybody speaks English. So they want to help you and they want to study and they want to understand, but many of them don't. So anyway, it was very important to learn Spanish. And I remember being so happy the first time I could make a joke in Spanish that somebody actually got it. I knew I was communicating. So that was good.
No, that's great. So no job, no Spanish. Now with your interest, I mean, I know personally you just love, architecture and buildings and everything like that and in design. So was it a natural that you said, okay, I'm going to jump into real estate, or did you gradually just kind of tinker around with it before you threw yourself wholeheartedly in?
Well, what had happened is before we even moved here, I mentioned the guy that our friend had set us up with, the real estate guy. This was right after 9/11, so he had no business at all. Like nobody was coming, nobody was flying anywhere. It wasn't a Mexico thing.
I remember that,
yeah. Nobody was going anywhere, so he was thrilled. He didn't even care if we were really serious or not, which we were not. That's what it started out. So he was one of the first people, he was actually the first person I met here. And so I was just chatting with him because we started to be friends, and I said, well, I need to make money. I need to get a job. He's like, come work for us. And I said, well, I don't have a real estate license. And he said, well, you don't need one in Mexico. What you need is to be with it. You need to know people. You need to know neighborhoods. You can study all that. And that's exactly what happened. And so my specialty has sort of become the centro histórico of Merida. But anyway, that's how that began. And then the same friend that I mentioned that we came here to visit, she had started what's called the Merida English Library. And
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a big meeting place here. So she had started that many years before, and she was very proud, and it was very tiny. I mean, there's a lot of paperbacks and some cassettes. Do you remember what those are?
Yeah.
And so they had started that, and then it started to just snowball a bit. There were more foreigners here because there was at the time there were probably about 100 people that socialized. That was it, and they could all meet at the library, and they still to this day have a lot of outreach programs and just things like that. But anyway, she had said, we used to have this, because I didn't know what I was going to do when I first came. So before I even had the real estate job, she said, I know you love architecture, you love homes, you speak eloquently about it. Would you be interested in starting up the house and garden tours again? And they had done that. They had done one a year, and they got a bus and drove everybody around. And I said, well, sure, that would be great to help the community, blah, blah, blah. So I started that, and I started doing it every Wednesday, and it was in the season. We have a lot more people in the wintertime, obviously, than summer. So it was October through March. Every Wednesday, I would lead the house and garden tour. So I spoke for about a half an hour before we go out, and then would go and see 3 or 4 houses that most of them had been restored. Sometimes we'd go see a ruin or something, but so that's how that led into that. So it all has to do with houses for me.
Now, do you still do your historic house tours?
Well, I did it for 12 years, and 3 weeks ago I stopped, and the reason was there's a whole long story with the library. I wasn't doing it there anymore, and I moved to this La 68 Cultural Center, and they lost their lease, and they were going out of business. And I said, you know what, that's enough for me too. I'll go out of business too. So I know that I'm going to start something else soon. I don't know what it's going to be, but it'll have to do with tours and benefiting some charity. But at the moment, I just stopped. It was mid-December when I stopped. So.
Well, so let me ask you. So, obviously, to me, I would guess that if you were doing, the Merida house and garden tours, it was a great way of meeting potential customers. I mean, in a land which is not Cancun or Playa del Carmen, how do you find people who are interested in buying real estate? I mean, do you dealing mainly with foreigners? You're dealing with a lot of nationals. How do you find people who want to buy a house, or how do people find you?
All good questions. So here's the thing. So this is one of the problems that there was a very vocal minority that thought that I was raking in all this money and taking advantage of all these people taking the house tour. I cannot trace any single sale to somebody having come on my house tour. The super frustrating part of it was people loved the tour. And I'm so happy that they did. I love doing it, and I think that showed. But what they would do is people would come up and say, oh, I went on your tour 3 years ago, and we bought a house. We bought it through your competitor, blah, blah. Isn't that great? And I'm like, yeah.
Thanks.
So that was not a source of any... I mean, I'm sure that some people saw things, but there was one guy, too. He became a good friend, he and his wife, and he called me the most dangerous man in Yucatan because they came into Merida, no intention of buying a house, went on my tour, and they bought a house. But again, it wasn't through me. So I'm like the goodwill ambassador for real estate for Merida. So the way that people do find me is we have a real web presence for my company, Mexico International. And then I have my own luxury-focused site, which is really kind of like the relationship between Toyota and Lexus. It's the same company, but then one is luxury and then one is everything else.
And that's HaciendaMexico.com,
HaciendaMexico.com, exactly. And it's not as many people see that, but it's fine. So what happens is we have 9 agents at Mexico International. We all work with different kinds of people. We all have sort of, mini specialties. I can show anything to anybody, but I have a specialty of more luxurious homes because I am a salesperson, but I can't just sell anything. I got to believe in it. I got to like it. I got to understand it. It's just getting a house cheap. I couldn't care less about any of that. But I can speak about the neighborhood and about the architecture of the homes, and a lot of people respond to that. Some people couldn't care less. They want a deal and they don't care.
No, I love the history aspect and architecture, yeah.
Well, and that again, I think is some of the difference between people that might go to a beach resort town and then other people that might seek out this unusual place that many people had never heard of, including me, that was kind of inland and very colonial.
So, I did, and I will ask you some questions about some of your favorite spots in Mexico and in the Yucatan and stuff. But I know that everybody who's listening to this, they're going to have this question. Okay, the big burning question is, can I own anything in Mexico, really?
So having given this little speech thousands of times, I just turned my brain off and let it go. However, it's actually really, it's pretty straightforward. It can be somewhat complicated, but it's not like there's tricks or anything. So the way that it works is Mexico has a law, a very old law. They basically don't want another Spanish invasion, even though that's most of who's here is the Spaniards. They've turned into Mexicans. But what they wanted is if you want to go anywhere in Mexico and buy something from somebody, from a Mexican, and you're a foreigner, you can just go do that. However, if you're 100 kilometers from the border or 50 kilometers inland from any part of the coast, there is a fideicomiso trust, they call it. And this is an old instrument document. It's very archaic. They're talking about getting rid of it, but its purpose, is to basically just have in all their ledgers who is buying these properties so that they know. So if someone comes in from wherever and buys an entire length of beachfront and kind of closes it off to anybody else, they're not able to do that. If somebody buys, you're only allowed to buy a certain amount of land as well, unless you're a corporation. And so it keeps them knowing exactly who's buying the properties and who's the owners of those. And the reason I say it's archaic is it's all held by the banks. So many people say, oh, I don't want the bank to take my property away. It is not an asset of the bank. You actually do own your home. It is your property. It is held by the bank in your name. It is not an asset of the bank. And so
They collect fees
exactly.
on it,
That's
right?
That's the archaic part, yes.
I have one, and I know I need to pay up on mine
exactly
as well.
Well, do you know that if you don't pay, the penalty's like $1 every year? So don't worry about it too much.
Oh, okay, great.
they really don't care whether you pay it. But before you sell a home, you've got to pay that, and that's what I deal with a lot. So that's the answer, is you can definitely own. But all of us here inland, I should say near the coast, that's not inland, we all have the fideicomiso document. It used to be really popular for people to form a corporation, a sort of fake corporation, in order to buy a property. It's a terrible idea nowadays. Again, there's other people that might not agree with that, but
is that a U.S. corporation or a Mexican
corporation?
corporation?
Corporation. So what you would do is, many times people would say, well, I think I'm going to buy 2 properties or whatever, or they just want to buy 1. It kept your taxes much lower. You'd never had to show any activity, like actual work activity that you would have done. And now they're cracking down on it a little bit more, which I think they should. And people were abusing that. So what they would do is, what they do now is if they see that you've had 3 years and your quote unquote business has not had any income and no expenditures, no nothing, they're going to question you. So it's really not a good idea. Not to mention, again, maybe too many details, but when you sell your home, if you own your home in a fideicomiso and you actually live in the country of Mexico and can prove that you do, and you live here as a resident, either permanent or temporary, you can avoid capital gains taxes almost completely. Whereas in a corporation, you owe 35% of the capital gain, no matter what. So there's no way around that. There's no tricks you can play. There's no nothing. You owe 35%. So that's a huge difference right there.
Wow. Now, I'm gonna ask this only because I know a lot of people who have done this, and maybe this is an antiquated way. I know a lot of people who have bought properties under the name of a U.S. corporation, so that if they sold to another foreigner, they could just sell the stock of that corporation. Are you aware of that type of foundation?
Yes, but what I understand is if it's U.S. or any other, for Mexico, foreign corporation, they need to buy it in a Mexican corporation itself. You need to form a Mexican version of your U.S. corporation. You cannot, as far as I understand, unless you're, Donald Trump or something. Let's not mention him. But,
I was just going to say, really? We're going to go there?
He could probably buy something. Not that he would. He hates.
No, he won't. He's going to put up a really nice wall, I heard.
A really good wall.
A really nice, and Mexico's going to pay for it.
We'll be amazed at how good it is.
Oh, good thing this isn't happy hour. We could get into some trouble on this conversation.
You said you needed 7 hours, right?
Yeah. No, it's all good. It's all good. So you still need, so that Mexican entity, there still needs to be that it could be just a,
yes.
Okay.
So you could buy it in a fideicomiso or a Mexican corporation. As far as I know, those are the two ways. Even if you have a U.S. corporation, it needs to form a Mexican branch, because only Mexicans or Mexican nationals are allowed to own the property here.
Okay, good. No, the people ask these questions all the time. You've heard them for years and years. I get them a lot. And, I kind of stopped trying to keep track with law. I know I need to pay for my fideicomiso and everything. I know what I need to do as a resident and a property owner, and that's kind of all I concern myself with.
Well, one of the reasons that people get confused is because in the U.S., I know, I shouldn't keep saying that. I shouldn't start every sentence with that. But you either, it's every year, exactly the same time, or they announce to you that you owe this money. Here it's like this dream world. You may get a bill, you may not. You may have thought it was January, maybe it's July, who knows. So that's why it can be confusing, is because they don't really remind you. And I think that's one of the reasons that the penalty is so low. It's like, oh, well, we didn't really tell them, so can't expect them to pay.
No, and I mean, the only reason to pay the property taxes, they usually hang banners across the street. And if you pay it not 60 days in advance, you get 10% off or something like that. I mean, I saw a sign that reminded me going, oh, yeah, I got to pay my property taxes.
Exactly. That's your version of an announcement.
That is, exactly. It saves paper. It's an environmentally friendly way. Hang a banner instead of mailing out notices. Well, I mean, obviously you've been in Merida for a long time, and I can tell just, well, I know you as well, but I know the passion in your voice for your love of the area, your love of the real estate and the history. And that's one of the beautiful things about Merida, is because it's so culturally rich. It's the oldest colonial city in Yucatan, as far as I recall. And so, and I'm a history buff for the Yucatan Peninsula, so I'm all over it. So I got to ask you, what's some of your favorite spots? You got some secret spots? I mean, and are they in Merida? I mean, you're well traveled. Are there other parts of Mexico that you like better?
Well, it's amazing, because with David's book, we've been able to travel so much over Mexico. And I actually, before he started doing the book that's coming up, I hadn't traveled that much. I'd been to a number of places, but I kept going back to the same ones. Like, I love Mexico City. I would go there if anybody asked me to. I would go there immediately because I love it, and it's so cool. Sometimes literally, but what happened is we were able to see all these different areas, and it is so rich. So when people think of Mexico, I don't think many of them realize the vast diversity. One of the things that's so funny here in Merida, because it's a bit like New York in the way that everybody's shoved out into the sidewalks. Whenever you walk around, it's funny too, because the man who helped us with our house, when he used to drive us around, he was waving at everybody, and everybody knew him. And I said, wow, that's what you get when you grow up in a place that was so foreign to me, so weird. Well, I do that now. I go around, and if I walk to a friend's house, I'll see 7 people, and I'll see them. They'll greet me. So that's one of the things that's really wonderful, is just the fact that it's all compressed like that. But as far as Merida, there's 2 main Meridas, which many people, again, don't realize. A lot of people come here for a visit, and they just stay right downtown, and they think that's what it is this kind of cute town, and all very low buildings, and lots of culture and lots of things to go see. Well, there's a whole other world. That's one of my favorite things about living here, is the fact that I can walk around. I can walk to friends' houses. I can walk over to the symphony. I can walk to get a nice coffee right nearby. But also, I can get in the car and go to like a world-class restaurant. The movies here are great. And also, the beach here is not my favorite beach in the world, the Progreso area. It's very different than many people are used to, but it's great that it's there. Just to go up for some cool breezes and some seafood right on the beach. It takes a half an hour. It's nothing. So that part is really great. The galleries here, the art galleries, but also the museum galleries, they're changing all the time. It's kind of amazing because the city feels much larger in the fact that they're having events all the time. It is literally every day. There is a magazine, a lot of my friends run that. It's called Yucatán Today, and they post everything that's happening. I used to try to tell people, yeah, I used to try to tell people what I had gone to or whatever, and I was like, just go to that. And now they have a website as well, and everything is there. So there's something for everybody all the time. I don't do quite as much as many people do because in my work, I talk all day long. I talk about this and that and this and that. I would like to go home and not talk to anybody. But I was going to mention also that one of the things is a lot of my clients will say, I don't really know how I'm going to meet people. I'm a foreigner. What am I going to do? I don't know how to meet people. It is actually the easiest thing possible. You go to 2 parties, and then you get invited to everything else, and they invite you to all their friends, and then you pick out which ones you like. It's actually very easy. So some of the things that I like to go to, I do go to the symphony whenever I can. It is unbelievably inexpensive, and they do a beautiful job. It's in a beautiful building that was built in 1906, and it's a really interesting classical architecture right in the middle of town. I can walk over there. It's super easy. They have one that starts at 9 p.m. On Fridays. Too late for me. They also have a noon on Sunday, which I love to go to. So it's noon to 2, and you're done. And you'll see a lot of people there. Again, you see the same people over and over, partly because we're all in the streets, but there's a lot more people in the winter here also that come just for the winter, and then there's the people that are here all year long. So there's tons of things to do, and I'll continue to think of what they are.
Now, on Sundays, I've been there on Sundays, and I usually I stay down the historic section, and I usually go to, do they still close off the streets, and they close off the streets and there's a big bike ride through town, yeah?
Yes, that's right. I always was a bike rider. I've ridden my bike my whole life, but so I was riding my bike every Sunday morning anyway. But what they did is, probably 8 years ago or something, they started making what's called a bici ruta, and there's it's at least 5 or 6 miles, maybe 10 kilometers of the streets that are closed off. And at first, it was like you'd see a couple more people. It is a huge thing now. So all the families come out, and they're all having such a great time. And it's from 8 until noon. And so, the streets are closed off, and it's a nightmare for driving at that time. But then as soon as it's done, then everybody can come back. But what they've done now is, because they know so many people are going to come to it, they'll have little impromptu concerts and places where they're selling something, like food and vendors who make art or something. So it's really turned very special.
It's like a festival almost.
It's like a little festival every single Sunday. But the city does close off. They keep the streets closed in the main square even after the bike route. And it's amazing. It's like watching an army come in, because there's nothing there. It's all very quiet first thing Sunday morning at 4 a.m. And then by 6 a.m., all these trucks arrive, and they're bringing everything to basically create an entire village. They're putting all these little areas where people sell food, all the things that I mentioned, and the main square just totally comes alive. Also, the main square is where everybody gathers, and if they'll often have concerts there as well. But so it's basically pretty much all day that everything is open there. And also several places. There's one little square that you may have visited called Santa Lucia. When we first came here, it was a 1700s, very, very colonial, very closed little place. So there was a square right on the corner, and then there was this one long building. It was completely closed up. There was nothing there, but every Sunday they would have dancing. And this is not a competition. This is just local people that love to come and dance. It's not, everybody's welcome. Every age is welcome. And it's so cute to watch them do that. But what's happened is, just recently, in the last year, really, last 2 years, all these restaurants have moved in here. And it used to be that the people of the North wouldn't dream of coming to downtown. They hated it. It's where the old people lived and the poor people lived. It's dirty, it's noisy, you can't park. They hate it. Well, that's changing because what they did was, which was very smart, is when they redid this 1700s building, they bought a big lot behind it, and it's a great covered parking lot now. So you know you're going to get parking. You don't have to worry about that, and that's just one big worry for these people off their mind. So it's now just hopping, and you go to those restaurants at 9 p.m. and it's unbelievably busy. So it's really quite wonderful, and the weekends, as you say, are even more so. It's everybody's having a great time. One thing that we noticed too is when we first bought the house. It's noisy. It's a busy street, and there's a lot of people coming and going. It's not horrible, but it's a busy street. But what happens is Saturday at 1:00, everybody goes home. So by 2 p.m., you can't hear anything on the street. So from 2 p.m. Saturday till Monday morning, it's dead silent on the streets. And right where it's busy, in the main square, you have all the activity and everything, but the streets themselves are just dead. It's kind of amazing.
Wow. Okay, so I'm sold now. If you can find me a cute little place that's turn of the century, some with some historic value, I'm going to pack up my flip flops and head west.
Right. Well, mentioning flip flops, you'll appreciate this. I've seen this so many times. I have two tiny stories. So. One is that it's very warm here. Obviously, it's really warm, and what happens is when you'll see this all the time, like in the early spring, you'll see the locals. So it'll get to be 70 degrees. And that is bitter cold for the Yucatecans, for the Meridanos. They are freezing at 70 degrees. And the newspaper posts the terrible weather that's come, that we had a cloud today. They literally will. But you go out and you'll see people with gloves on.
No.
Yes, like, lightweight gloves. And sometimes a scarf, they'll have hoodies, and they're all bundled together because they're freezing. It's just hilarious still to me to see that. But the funniest part is then you'll see a Canadian tourist lady in a tube top walking by them, and she's like sweating bullets. So it's really, really funny. One other thing that I was going to mention, and this encapsulates, this just happened yesterday, but it encapsulates one of the reasons that I'm here. The people are the reason that I'm here. I love the architecture. I love my house. I love the opportunity to live basically debt-free for the first time in my life, no debt. But it's the people. So walking home, I saw this broken down Volkswagen, just a wreck of a Volkswagen. And something had happened. I think it had a flat tire or something. Well, the family is standing on the side, and it was a young husband and wife and a boy, maybe 5 years old, and then a little baby. They were having the time of their lives, killing time until somebody came and helped them. They probably had called a neighbor or a friend or something, but they were laughing and joking and teasing the baby, and then the little boy was hiding behind the mother. It was, if that was me, I would be on the phone, I would be yelling, I would be furious, I'd be scared that somebody's going to wreck the car. That is not at all the way that they looked at things. And I think that to me it just says it all. And every day I get a lesson like that.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, the people in Yucatan are wonderful. And just remind, you see that type of situation, what's really important, family and friends and the time we have together. It's awesome. Absolutely. I love it. That's for sure. Well, listen, Keith, this has been great. And I certainly want to have you come back and share some more of all your great stories and your insights.
Yeah, I'm sure more things will happen, and then I can talk about them.
I want to hear what you do now that you're not doing your house and garden tours, what the next evolution will be. Where can people find you on the web? Give us your websites and... Yes,
well, again, I mentioned my partner, but he is David Sterling, and he's an award-winning writer now. He's got an amazing cookbook and another one coming out. And I say cookbook loosely, but it's an amazing volume.
I have a copy, and it's called Yucatan.
Yucatan, and that's
he got an award for that, didn't he?
He got several awards, James Baird Awards in New York. So that was great to go back to where he came from as somebody that kind of conquered Merida. And also he just loves the people, and that totally comes through. And then he has the Los Dos Cooking School, and where that is los-dos.com, and it's an amazing experience. A lot of people come on it who are not cooks. They don't really, and the same with the people who buy the book. It's not it's not necessarily about, learning a recipe and making it. It's learning about the history, and he talks about all the people who gave him those. Anyway, there's that.
Oh, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
I knew and cooked with David Sterling before Martha Stewart did.
Oh, yes.
I tell people that David Sterling, I knew him before Martha was over there.
And were you in prison before she was? Or no, that's not.
No.
Well, and then I have Mexico International is my real estate company. So it's Mexico International Real Estate, and its website is Mexintl, MEXINTL.com. My own one that's more luxury focused is haciendamexico.com. And those are all the places you can find me.
And I'll put in as our blog posts and stuff. You've got a bunch of videos on YouTube.
Yes.
On Yucatan Today. Are you on Facebook as well?
Yes, on Facebook. And yes, on Yucatan Today, if you just put in Keith, Keith, I've got like 20 videos, and what they are is I talk about the neighborhood for a moment, and then we go see a house. I walk you all the way through it just as if you're here, and they're very different, all the houses. My house is actually one of them. So anyway, I think they're fun, and we're doing more of those all the time, so we keep adding to that as well. So that's yucatantoday.com.
Great. Well, Keith, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed listening to you. And next time, let's do it together over a mezcal or a tequila or a cold beer.
Exactly. In person. That sounds great.
In person. Well, thanks so much.
Right. Well, thank you, Kay.
Thanks so much for joining us today, and a big thanks to my friend Keith. Please remember you can visit Keith's website at haciendamexico.com or Mexico International Real Estate. Keith can also be seen on YouTube on Yucatan Today's channel with all his great videos about the neighborhoods of Merida. Also, if you don't know how to get a hold of him on Facebook or anything like that, you can contact me, sk@locogringo.com, and I'm more than happy to turn you on to Keith, give you his contact information if you're interested in owning a piece of paradise, or if you want to find out a little bit more about Merida, happy to hook you up with Keith. Well, that's it for today. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe. For links, show notes, and more information, head on over to locogringo.com or give us a call toll-free at 800-478-0081.
Porque se tragó la luna, estaba enferma la rana, su madre soba que soba, dedos de pluma la panza, pensó ranita que luna era una toronja blanca, y aunque la luna es de leche, la leche estaba cortada. Croa, croa, dedos de pluma, croa, croa, dedos de agua, croa, croa.